Alright guys, in this video I'm going to be answering a question that I get asked a bloody lot, which is all about how I organise myself for going through the financial news each day and making sure I pick up on enough things to be able to build my fundamental view and plan trades in various different markets. Now, I haven't planned anything for this video, it's just going to be me talking through my process because I think it's not really necessary for me to go through all the details and step by step because it's not rocket science, and I'm sure most of you that have been wondering this and been asking me about this subject are really just wanting reassurance about how I do it to make sure you're on the right track and maybe pick up a few little tricks and tips here and there. So if you want something more detailed, leave a comment below, let me know and I'll plan something out. It's not a problem, but we'll hopefully keep this one short and sweet and get to the point. So basically, like, the news can be overwhelming if you are a beginner or you haven't been trading for a while because there's so many different sources and so many different things you can look at. It's difficult to know where to start or what's important. So over the years, I've refined things to try and make use of different new technology that comes out, or new websites, new apps and that kind of thing, to try and organize myself better, to make the process more efficient, and to in general make things easy to reference back to. Now, some of you would have read the free ebook that comes from joining the inner circle, which if you haven't joined yet, the link's down below, it's free to join. The ebook's called How to Trade Like a Traderpreneur. And in that book, I talk a lot about how I organize myself with the use of things like Evernote, I talk about Twitter. So a lot of this is based on that still, I still do use those things, but I've refined it even further. So if you have been reading that book and using some of those things, you can still by all means use that stuff still, but it's just I've moved a step along from that. So let's start off with actually going through the daily news. You see, I think that with the daily news, a lot of people end up going back to the same sources. And you kind of notice a trend with people from using certain sources of how they think. And one thing in particular I've noticed that there's a lot of traders or investors who their main source of news is a website like Zero Hedge. And that gives them a really extreme view. And there'll be other people that maybe use Reuters or something like that, and they'll have a certain other view. What I think when you're trading or investing is really important to get your bias completely out of it and to see both sides of the story, because really you want to approach things in an objective kind of way and see things for what they actually are before you form your opinion afterwards. So if you keep going back to the same source, then you're going to get that certain source's ideology. Now, there's a book that I've read a while ago called Super Forecasters. I think it's by Phil Tetlock, I believe. Surname's definitely Tetlock, you'll be able to find it. There's one chapter where he's talking about someone that was a super forecaster and they built their own little system, it was an automated system, I think, of checking, choosing the news source to use. So let's say that you're reading a story about Donald Trump or something, some sort of thing that's in the current affairs right now, something that's a current event. Then you could go to maybe The Guardian or The Independent or whatever, and you're going to get one certain ideology. So he had a system where he could see what the different news sources were, the different resources he could use, and what the ideology was. So if he saw one that was maybe slightly to the right, he could then read one that was slightly to the left after, and it's giving him a balanced view. I think that we need that to an extent, and that's why I like to focus on not having specific sources that I go to all the time, but having an aggregation. So over the years, I've started to use more and more news aggregators. And it started off that I was using some that I'd just find in the App Store, and I'd find ones that you could just scroll through on your phone. And these days, I've actually started using Apple News. So on the iPhone, it comes as standard on the iOS, but I think you can still download it on other phones. And honestly, guys, that's the most convenient way. Basically, I add all the topics for the things that are going to be relevant to what I'm trading or what I'm looking at. So for example, I can add Euro, I can add Dollar, I can add Federal Reserve, I can add Bank of England, and then I can go even deeper. Say I'm looking at specific equities at a moment in time, I might add Snapchat if I want to lose money, or I might add other things. And that way I can scroll through, and it also then sort of picks up on what you look at, and it puts things in the trending or the most important news for you, and you can set alerts on certain subjects. So when there's breaking news, for example, from the Bank of England, it will alert me on my phone. Because what I find is that when I'm on the computer and I'm trading, I'm looking at the charts, it's much more convenient to have something separate to look at. And I'm talking separate to the screens, something where I can have a break from the screen, go and make a cup of coffee or something and go and flick through on my phone. So that's what I've started doing in terms of getting the news. I've used an aggregator, and you'll be able to find one. You don't have to use Apple like I'm using, you can use something else. But then basically, I'm also surfing the internet all the time. Surfing the internet, wow, does anyone even say that anymore? I'm always looking around on different sources and stuff, particularly in the evenings, especially if I'm researching something. So at that point, I use something called Pocket. Now with Pocket, you can install the little app on your browser. You can also have it on your phone or anything else. And basically, when you see an article that you think might be interesting, like let's say that there's a headline, because obviously when you're scanning through different websites, you might see a few different things you want to read, but you don't have the time right then. It's basically like bookmarking it. So when you go back to Pocket later, you can see the articles that are listed there for you to read later. And I find this really important, particularly when I'm researching a certain topic. Like let's say that I'm building a portfolio and it's about a specific strategy. Let's say a few months ago we were looking at Italian banks. So I might be looking through different articles about the stuff that's going on there, but I want to bookmark them for later when I want to then do a deeper research about it. So I'll use Pocket to do that, and then they're saved somewhere else. And this is really important because I also, for like my news sources, because like I said, I don't like to go to one source or another. I do have certain sources that I use for specific types of news, but a lot of the time I want to use something like Google News as well, where you've got an aggregation. So I might have a certain topic and I'll put it in there so I can see the different resources, the different sources, different outlets that are talking about that topic, and then I can easily use Pocket to have them saved up for later. Now, another thing that I do in order to understand what topics I want to look into is that I'll use websites where people give their own analysis and their own opinions about things, such as a website like Seeking Alpha. But I won't just go for anyone's opinion. It's something that I build up over time as a trust in certain analysts, because I think no one gets it right all the time, or no one gets it right the majority of the time in some cases, but there's some people where you might pick up on certain things they're talking about. For example, I'm not very heavy in the bond market. I used to follow it a lot more than I do these days. So if I want a view on the bond market, I might have certain people I look at. The same for things to do with interest rates or things to do with certain governments, certain equities, whatever. I'll have certain analysts I'm looking at, and whatever like they pick out as their important subject at the time, like certain topics that they're really focusing on, I'll then take that topic, go to something like Google News and see what everyone else is saying about it to get a broader view. So I'm not just trusting one person necessarily, I'm trusting their view of what they think is important to then go and see if I agree from the sources that I can find. Now, when I do find information that I think is important and I want to look at later, then I'll start to save this to Evernote. So Evernote, if you don't know, like we talk about it a lot in the How to Trade Like a Traderpreneur book, but it's just a really simple way of organizing things. And I use it a lot for creating like an alert before certain news releases come out or certain times of the week. I might have a notebook with like different notes in it, and there'll be an alert so it comes up on my screen close to that time that I know to read through that. So for example, if I bookmark things on Pocket, I read some things that I think are interesting but I don't need it just yet, but I need to be reminded, then I'll put it in Evernote and there'll be a time that will come off my screen and then I can look through that information and really dissect it and stuff. And that's perfect for having charts of what's happened after previous releases, like economic releases, for when the next one comes out and so on. So it's a really good way of sorting things. I can then tag it all so that it's related to a certain topic, so it's all tagged and organized. And yeah, that's basically those sort of three things that I do are the main things. So we've got Pocket, we've got a news aggregator, we've got Evernote, and really I don't think there's anything else I need for actual news stories. But then comes having the live feed. So in the past, you know, I think people had a lot more focus on having like a Bloomberg terminal or Reuters or, you know, that kind of thing. I'm talking Thomson Reuters, like the actual data feed, not the website Reuters or the website Bloomberg, but the actual data feeds that they have. But those can be quite expensive, especially if you're a private trader or a small company, then it's not necessary sometimes to pay all that cost. Like there's some fantastic analysis tools we've used on Bloomberg before and Thomson Reuters. I haven't used other ones like FactSet so much, but there's some brilliant analysis tools, but they're not necessary. If you're just using it for getting the news from the wires, then sometimes just having Twitter open is good. I use TweetDeck, but you can use your own whatever software you prefer. I think TweetDeck actually got acquired by Twitter, so it's the best one I think to use. But that way you can have actually a timeline that's refreshing constantly, so it's like a feed, because obviously when you have Twitter in the browser, you have to keep clicking the button to get things up. So I have trusted sources that I have on Twitter, so some of these will be news sources, like actual news companies like Reuters or something like that. Some of them will be analysts that I really trust the opinion of. Some of them will be other traders or, you know, investment strategists from certain institutions. And there'll be some people that I might set alerts on when they actually tweet. So I'm aware from my phone it will come up on the screen when they've tweeted. For example, an important one is Donald Trump. I think in the city, a lot of people now have that alert on their phone. When Trump tweets, it comes up. And sometimes everyone laughs. It depends on what's going on. So that's how I'm using like the news, like how I'm getting live news, economic releases coming out. I can obviously go on like Econoday or something like that to see it coming up, but I can also go on Twitter and see when it's actually being released by the news sources that are there. So in a nutshell, and going through it very, very quickly and at a high level, that's what I do for organising myself when it comes to news. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'd also like to know what are your main sources or the main tactics that you use for gathering the news. And if there's anything that you want to know from me or anything that I can go in deeper and give you step-by-step guides about, then do let me know. Give us a thumbs up if you found this one interesting, then I know that you'll like more of these sort of how-to guides, I guess you can call it that. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos about trading. Thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.